Head Lopper. You did the first book not knowing what you were going to do with it.
Sure.
Then comes the second book that you kickstarted, and then it becomes an image book. From then on, when you realize, okay, this is going to be an ongoing thing, what's your process? What does your process become? Meaning, are you studying arcs, or you have the whole scope of the whole idea of the whole story, when it's going to end?
I always liken it to like, you know, being on a train and laying track like immediately in front of you. You're just like, you've only laid enough track for you to roll over because you're just chasing these deadlines. So now going into volume 5, I have a vague idea of the route, but I don't know what happens in each step. And I have like kind of a list of like people to kill, I guess.
This is the Inkpulp podcast.
It's like the music to The Thing when we're waiting for the countdown, the dum dum, dum dum, which for me is my favorite use of sound in a movie. Dum dum.
That's really important. Dum dum. Yeah.
Dum dum. Dum dums.
I'm the first dumb, but you're the second dumb.
I'll take the third.
We're Tweedledee and Tweedledum. All right, welcome to the Inkpulp podcast, everyone. Me and Matteo are back. Today we've got a really special guest, someone who I truly admire as a creative and as a business person and as a friend. Andrew MacLean, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I appreciate
Andrew.
it.
Hello.
Thanks for joining us, man. It's a pleasure.
My pleasure.
Yeah, so Andrew, I would love to just jump right into this. You have built your own cottage industry. I met you years ago. I think Head Lopper was a mini comic at that point. Is that correct?
Probably, yeah. I self-published the first 2 issues, a 20-page one that I thought would be the only one I ever did, and then maybe like a 45-page one. And I was selling them at shows. I was giving a ton away. But yeah, that sounds about right.
Was that always the goal? Just build your own thing?
I mean, I just wanted to work in comics, and I thought that like, if I just, at the time I was like, if I just had a comic, if I could just get published, that would be, all I wanted. And so I was doing a lot of kind of work for hire work with artists who would just pay me, writers who would pay me like a page rate. Either they did a Kickstarter or they'd be like, oh, I've got enough money for like 5 or 10 more pages or something. I was just trying to work, but I was doing like a ton of pitches and getting a ton of rejections and everything. And as we all do, especially getting started. And Head Lopper came out of, I was working on 2 books at the same time, and both scripts were
I know
late.
that feeling.
Yeah, both scripts were late, and I was like,
I know that feeling too when scripts are late.
Yeah, and all of a sudden like, well, shit, I was going to be busy.
Are you describing my life right now?
A lot of people's lives, yeah. And I was also not proud of anything I was really doing, because it was just, I had all these pitches, and I was like, now I have all these pages I've drawn that no one will see. We did 12 pages and we're done or something. And I was like, well, shit, I've got this like month of nothing to do, and I felt like I had nothing to show for it. So I was like, I've got these 2 characters, Norgal and Agatha. I was like, if I do, a 20-page comic this month and I don't even pitch it, I just wanted to have something to show for my work. I was like, that, well, at least I'll have this one 20-page thing that was exactly what I wanted to draw. Nobody told me what to do. I just had a good time. And, and that was kind of the thing that ended up working out. Again, I didn't even pitch it. I think I printed like 100 copies and gave away like 70 of them at Heroes that year or something.
Yeah. Yeah. How were you supporting yourself at the time you did that?
Well, I was unemployed. My wife and I moved to New York City. I'd been working in grocery stores and drawing at night. And my wife got this cool opportunity to work for the New York City district attorney's office. I was like, well, we got to do this. This is really cool. I was like, I don't want to work in a grocery store anyways. we'll move down there to New York City. There's got to be jobs galore, So we moved down there, and I just started applying to annual random jobs. I applied to be like an office assistant at like DC and all these things, and I didn't get a single interview. So I would spend.
Whoa! Shit!
Yeah, it was like 2009, 2010. It was not a good time to find a job.
It wasn't a great time, probably.
Yeah, and so I'd spend the morning filling out like regular full-time job applications, and then I would spend the afternoon on like freelance websites, like just trying to get graphic design work, illustration work, any kind of supplemental work, basically by just charging way less than professional rates. And and so that was like, any money I did have coming in was from this freelance stuff, which was very little. And slowly but surely, I was like, I really started to be like, I don't want to take any freelance work that isn't comics work. But all along, I just kept thinking, next week I'll have a proper job. And it just didn't happen. And so slowly but surely, I was able to turn comics into a job. It's kind of a blessing in disguise. It was scary to live in New York City without a job.
Yeah, I was thinking the same.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I bet it was.
Yeah. Because it's one of those things, like I always think that if it's almost like to make, the comics as a profession work, you need to work full time to produce enough work to pull it off. And so if you've got a full-time job, there's this moment that must be a real like leap of faith that just be like, I can't pull this off while I have a full-time job.
That was me. You got to be like, just pull the plug on a job or something.
So I didn't have to make that choice, which would have been scary, but
right. Well, you were like sink or swim, buddy. Make this shit work because there's nothing else.
Yeah, I was on my honeymoon, and this guy had been like, "We draw my comic." I was like, "I'll draw anything if you pay me." And Kickstarter was a brand new thing, and he's like, "Well, there's this thing called Kickstarter. If I can get you money for it, you'll draw." I was like, "Totally." And I was like, "I don't know what this Kickstarter thing is." And so I think the Kickstarter was going while we were on our honeymoon, and I said to my wife, I was like, "When we get back, if this Kickstarter thing worked out, I've got some more work to do. If it doesn't, I think I got to just give up on art." And like, the one thing is like, I didn't want to go back to working in grocery stores. I was like, that's it. I have no choice. When we get back, I got to go back to the grocery stores.
I've been there too.
Yeah. And so, but luckily that Kickstarter had made it through, and it got me just a little bit further down the road, which got me to my next thing.
What was that Kickstarter for?
That was called Meat Space. It was just kind of like this like sci-fi thing, like Ready Player One, where like the characters are kind of existing both in the real world and in a video game. It was a little bit of a lifeline. Not much money, but enough.
So seeing that Kickstarter, that new thing Kickstarter work, had you put out your first little Headlopper book at that point?
No, that was before it. Yeah. So that Meat Space was before I had done Headlopper. I had a bunch of ideas, didn't really consider myself a writer or anything. So I just thought like the only way forward was going to be with, collaborating. And so, I hadn't put that out. That was, I don't know, maybe a year later or so.
I remember, I'm curious to know when you had this realization. I remember you talking to me and you were like, "Shawn, what you got to do is if you can create your first book, figure out a way to get it done, and then kickstart it, that will fund you to do the second book, like give you money while you're working on it, and you just keep that cycle going." And it seems like you've really been able to work that into a full-fledged successful business. When did that start for you? Like, when did you start going to Kickstarter? You self-published on your own the first mini and the second?
The second one, right?
Yeah, the second one. The first one, we published like 100 copies. And I was like, "Hey, I did this fun thing this one time, and then I really enjoyed it. People came back to me and were like, 'You got to make more of that.'" And then
I think I was one of them.
Kickstarter had become really a thing. And so at that point, I knew I could go back to it. But yeah, it's true. Like, so much of one of the really hard things in comics, even people who I think are professionals struggle with this sometimes, is like, you can't like creator-owned books. You're getting paid in royalties, especially if you're at like Image and you don't have an advance or something like that.
Right.
They don't have, you're not getting paid. Like, it's like, for example, you guys obviously know this, but say your first issue comes out, not even a trade or whatever, your FOC, your initial orders, you're not going to get that paycheck for like 3 months, right? So now you've had to draw a whole issue. Image doesn't want to put out your first issue until you've drawn 3. So you've been drawing for 6 to 9 months or something. And how do you stay afloat doing all of this work up front, to just get started? And then again, like, even if you get all the way through all of that, your trade paperbacks don't start paying out until maybe like 6 months after they come out, or twice a year or something. So there's so much front loaded work. And again, it's that thing, like, if you've got a full-time job and you can only draw a page a week or something, like, how do you get started? And so Kickstarter does really help that. Kickstarter, it's like, you can get paid for your product up front. So you can give yourself your own advance by having something to live off of while you're drawing.
Yeah. So from then on, it comes another problem. The fact that you have to be reliable, because I mean, there's horror stories,
Oh God, yes.
People getting the money and never finish the product. So, I think you gotta trust yourself with that. Yeah.
One of the really hard things that we're not necessarily, like, as artists, always great business people. And so much of running a successful Kickstarter campaign is just accounting. And like, you have to like create these budgets up front so that you don't shoot yourself in the foot on the back end.
Right.
And you really got to try to think of every stupid thing to charge up front and make sure that you've covered it. Everything down to like your freaking like tape to tape your box or something, like.
Right.
My thing was always, I mean, my wife, eventually started to work with me, and she's brilliant at that stuff. That's a big help. But also my thing was always like, all right, do your best to get a quote, to get a figure for what you think this thing would cost, and then pad it. Like, because there's going to be mistakes. You got to put a little extra money on top to make sure that you actually pull it off.
Did you find it out the hard way with your first campaign, or you already?
I don't remember that. I know I did that one very independently. My wife would probably say yes. Like, I remember she was like, I just came home one day and you're like, hey, I'm doing this thing. And you'd like launch this whole campaign. And I was like, wait a minute. Like, what about your budgets and stuff? I was like, I don't know. I got it. I don't remember running into any problems. I probably didn't make any money off it in the long run, but I don't know. I don't remember that being a nightmare. Honest, I hate to say it, but usually the ones that have been attached to that became a problem were when there was more people involved. So like my wife Erin, she's a math whiz. She's type A, like super, super organized and everything. So she's really good at all that stuff. So between me and her, like, if we have control over the whole thing, it's probably going to be okay. There's obviously always some unforeseen things. We did Snarl the Gone last year, my kaiju mini comic. There was a ton of damaged books just because of like, the paper thickness and all this stuff, and like stuff that's just out of your control.
Was that a printer issue?
Yeah, it was a printer issue. It's like things that I feel like they should have caught. So like, specifically, it was like, hey, like this many pages in the book with that like thickness of paper, their cutter couldn't cut it straight. And then it literally broke their staple machine. I was like, well, you let me order it, and it was only like 30 some odd pages. And then, because the books didn't come wrapped in plastic, a ton of them got all scuffed up. So there was like, 200 or 300 books that I like lost,
What was the print run on that?
I think I did 3,000 on it.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but I mean,
this is a Snarlagon, right?
Yes. Yeah. So, I mean, and again, like you learn stuff along the way. So like when we just did this, Agatha Kickstarter a couple months ago, I was like, all right, I'm going to make sure that they'll, wrap these in plastic. And when they started running into some issues again on some of these same things, at least they hit me up this time and they're like, hey, if you change the cover stock, we can avoid these problems. But they didn't do that on Snarlagon. So anyways, there's always something you can't predict.
Yeah. Are you still fulfilling orders yourself with your wife, or are you using services? Or
Yeah, we use a service.
Yeah.
There's a company in Maryland called Flying Cloud that we use. They started this warehouse started by doing Kickstarters, and they do basically all creative stuff. Like they do distribution and shipping for like Bloom and for Oni and a ton of board games and things. And so they're really involved. They're really experienced in Kickstarters and doing creative projects and everything.
that's awesome.
Yeah, they're a good partner. Very helpful. And obviously, like, the more I do this, the more obviously I really want to spend my time doing creative things. So it's really
No, absolutely.
Yeah, it's worth it to just take something off your plate.
Yeah, I think
That's
absolutely.
Please share the link after we finish recording. Please share the link so we'll share it on this episode.
Oh, sure. Yeah. They're called Flying Cloud. They're really great. I'll share it with you.
Yeah. I'll put it in the description below.
Yep.
So do you, as far as designing the Kickstarter and building it, do you all do all that, you and your wife, is that a home thing, or do you?
Yeah,
use,
we do
backer
that.
kit?
Yeah, like I said, you can come up with as much. It's in your best interest to come up with some merch for, because I feel like people will pick up, extras more than they will at, like, even say a convention or something. So it's worth, taking orders for t-shirts or posters or whatever. I also just like making stuff. So that's kind of in my wheelhouse. But yeah, we figure that all out up front, get our production partners and things, do our best to get a quote, like I said, for every tiny little stupid thing along the way, just so you don't, screw yourself over.
And how about, like, I've heard a lot of people say, like, whatever you offer, it's best to make it something that can fit in the package with the book, so you don't have to have secondary packaging.
I mean, it is. It's certainly cheaper. You can set all your own shipping rates and everything, because people pay for their shipping up front, and it's not like there's a calculator. That's one of the challenges. It's not like Kickstarter or even BackerKit or any of these companies that I'm aware of have something where you're like, all right, even BackerKit, I've been working on BackerKit lately, like, you can set it for your shipping to be weight based, but even if you put your weights in there, it's not going to calculate your shipping costs for you. You still got to do it yourself. So, I mean, again, that's one of the things that's really tough to calculate.
Well, I'm guessing that's because shipping rates change all the time.
They do constantly change.
So when you start your Kickstarter, if it's one thing, it could be more when your Kickstarter's over.
Absolutely, yeah. And as you get closer, like we're running into this right now, and the same with Snarlagon last year's, where we're getting closer to the holiday season. So there's like holiday, like, late fall, early winter, December kind of like surcharges and stuff, because like shipping obviously gets denser. So it's like right now we're really trying to get all our Agathas out the door before the prices go up.
That's good. So have you found, because I've heard theories on this, have you found there's an ideal time of year to launch a Kickstarter?
There's probably someone who knows better than I do. There's always an ideal time. I think that people, if you're around the holidays, if you're around November, December, January, that's probably a bad time, because people are less likely to, spend money on themselves.
I heard August through October is the ideal time.
I would believe it. Yeah, I think that makes sense to me. But there's probably some hard data out there for that. I mean, there's always...
Well, August would be terrible for an Italian, because everybody is on vacation in August. So.
So they're spending money on themselves.
Don't do anything in August. Yeah, just spending money on other stuff like ice cream and,
ice
dinner on the beach.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
I'd rather spend money on that.
Definitely than a comic book.
I know, right?
Andrew, what I was trying to ask clumsily was, have you, with your Kickstarters, noticed anything like that in your experience? Or do you just launch them when you're ready to go and just... Mostly,
yeah. The one thing I try to avoid is the holidays, and the last couple that I've done, it was like a little different back when I did like the Headlopper ones, like maybe like 10 years ago or so. But my more recent ones is I also wanted to do those without the pressure of like deadlines and stuff. Working on the Headlopper comics at Image, we all understand this. You can get really burnt out on your deadlines. And so I wanted the luxury of not having a deadline on these last 2 Kickstarter projects and just working at them at the pace that was comfortable. So I was like, I didn't want to launch the Kickstarter until I was done drawing it. So I could just do the Kickstarter, send it to print, get it out the doors as quickly and as possible. Sorry. No, I was going to say, so the only other factor was just try to avoid the holiday shipping season.
Gotcha. No, my question was, how are you feeling about working without deadlines? Because we spoke about it recently, because that's what I'm trying to do with my book. I'm basically doing the same exact thing that you were talking about. So basically, the Kickstarter or whatever I want to do with it starts only once the book is finished.
Right.
And I'm trying to work without deadlines, but I'm realizing now that I have stuff I had to do.
Yes.
Now I'm starting to really work. Like, I'm realizing that I still need some kind of,
absolutely
pepper under my ass. So,
I think exactly. I totally agree. I think it's a double-edged sword. Like, I think a lot of us run into this. If you've got projects that don't have real urgent deadlines or none at all, you will just put everything else before it, because you get a cover, you get some illustration thing. You're like, oh, I really want to work on this character. This pays really well. You're gonna get in your own way. Like, I've been trying to get started on the next volume of Lopper at Image, but it's not going to come out till next year. And so I keep putting everything ahead of it. Like, I've written it, I've drawn 1 page, but it's like, I get a cover or something, and I'm like, all right, I'll get going on that next, And you can I call that nickel and diming. Like, you can just nickel and dime away all your time for your whole damn life, and you'll just never get to it. So I mean, even when
that sounds like what Matteo kind of went through, because you were doing your book, Matteo, and then you just got flooded with covers, and you kept saying yes.
Yeah. That's why I everything sped up. Like, this year. This year is when I was able to get in the loop and producing stuff. And now I'm writing issue number 4. I'm planning on finishing it by the end of the year. So all of a sudden it started going faster. But again, I needed a little push from, outside commitments. Otherwise it's so hard. Like, the only person that I know that I'm sure is like a fucking robot, doesn't give a shit. Like, whenever he's got the thing, is Shawn Murphy.
I was just gonna say
he's like, okay, this book's gotta be done by this because I said so, and he's gonna do it no matter what. He doesn't give a fuck, and it's he's incredible. Like, it's incredible at that, and not only that. Like, if you think about that kind of discipline with that amount of talent combined together, it's incredible. Like, it's not a casualty that is so successful,
Right. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I think I don't know where she read it, but my wife read somewhere that this little mantra that I've tried to adopt. And like, it's basically, unless it's a hell yes, it's a no. So like, if you get,
oh, that's good.
Yeah. So it's like, and it's hard to follow, but unless you get offered something that you're like, this is like, 10-year-old me is freaking out, or something like where you're like, I cannot say no to this. This is too cool. Then it's a no. Or like the other option is like, this money is more money than they should give me. Then it's a yes.
Exactly. That was more my case. Like, not because I'm not excited about my next project. I'm always excited about the next thing coming. But it was like, I did a year and a half working on the first 2 issues. And, I put money aside, but, you start seeing the money going a little down, down. It was it was a pretty decent amount of money. So I was never scared. But in my head, like, my thing is like, I'm always, if I gain 10, I'm going to spend 3. So I was still seeing the money going down, and I got kind of like, shit, should I do something to, to put some more money in that account? And eventually I decided to do that. But I totally understand that. But I wanted to ask you something else. Since we're talking about Head Lopper, right now you said you're starting to work on the what was that? The fifth volume, right?
Yeah.
You have 16 in the bank.
16
books.
Yeah,
16
issues. Yep.
Yeah. And what's your creative process with it? Meaning, I'm really curious to know. Once you did, because you just said you did the first book not knowing what you were going to do with it.
Sure.
Then comes the second book that you kickstarted, and then it becomes an image book. So what's from then on when you realize, okay, this is going to be an ongoing thing? What's your process? What does your process become? Meaning, are you studying arcs? Or you have the whole scope of the whole idea of for the whole story, when it's going to end, and then you're just slowly walking towards that goal, or you're just going, with the flow?
I went with the flow at first because it was like, I don't know how long I'll be able to do this. So it's like, why plan long term? I also find like the older an idea gets, the less I like it. So I was like, let's just focus on what's in front of me. So it was like when Image first picked it up, I was like, all right, I'm going to do this first volume. I finished it and I was like, hey, I've got way more I can do with this. If you guys are interested, they're like, oh yeah, keep going then. And so then I was like, all right, I'll do number 2. But I was like starting to loosen up the ideas, let myself kind of dream further. And then, so by the time I got to volume 4, I felt like I had some ideas, but I always liken it to like, being on a train and laying track like immediately in front of you. Where you're just like, you've only laid enough track for you to roll over because you're just chasing these deadlines. So I was so burnt out on that and afraid that, the quality of the book would start suffering if I didn't step back and like really think about what I wanted it to be. So by the time I got to 4, I knew I needed to take a little break to kind of make more long-term plans. Cause it's like, all right, this story is going to keep going and I have an end I'd like to get to. So now going into volume 5, I do have a kind of, end target. I don't know I have a vague idea of the route, but I don't know what happens,
And you're talking about the head target for the end of volume 5 or for the end of everything?
The end of everything, I have a target.
Oh, the end of everything. Okay.
And
gotcha.
I have like kind of a list of like people to kill, I guess.
In real life as well, right?
Yeah, of course, naturally. Yeah. But then beyond that, each volume, beyond like a person to go for Nordal, the Head Lopper to go get, each time I'm kind of like, I look at a volume, I'm like, what's kind of a setting I haven't drawn yet? It's really, it's really visually driven first. It's like, what do I want to draw? And then kind of maybe like story structure, and then and some like tentpole fights. Like if there's like, again, there's 4 issues per volume, so it's like, what are the at least 4 big battles, to have. But yeah, I do think of settings because I'm like, all right, I'm gonna go. My target is 9 volumes, and so I'm like, all right, what are the 9 different like places to visit on the map? Like, I don't want to repeat myself. So each volume comes and I'm like, all right, now that I finished drawing a volume, what am I sick of drawing? All right, I need to go somewhere else with it.
Gotcha. Okay.
What made you? Go ahead, Matteo.
No, I was just thinking out loud. Like, it's so weird to me because I'm the opposite. Like, I'm so rational when it comes to writing. Also, I haven't been writing forever. Like, this is the first time I write after, 15 years. So, I'm kind of rusty. But to me, I need to be like, the way I reason is, okay, this is a starting point and this is the end. And then I'm going to start working, nailing the field until I get here. Sure. And once I study this part, which is the most difficult part for me, it's done. But I need like this. Right now, I'm not able to do this. Like, okay, let's go. and see where
I don't know
things
how to
go.
do that
It's
either.
so hard for me.
Yeah, some people. I recently read Stephen King's On Writing, and he describes this process that I think even some comics people do, where they just come up with a concept, and they're like, "Yes, that concept is strong enough to be a story." Page 1, and I'm just like, no way. I need to know where I'm going. I need to have targets for every little thing.
Dude, actually, I have a good story for that. One of my favorite writers is Elmore Leonard, and I got the chance to interview him for my old podcast, and we talked about his writing process. And he just has an idea of like a setting and some characters, and he just starts writing.
That's so crazy.
And he'll be like, oh, okay, so that's going to be a chapter in the middle somewhere. And then he's like, I want to write about this character. And I'm like, okay, that's a chapter I'll put towards the beginning. And he just starts like he writes all these chapters and then edits it all together. Like it was fascinating, but like horrifying at the same time.
Yeah.
Well, I guess you can get there once you're a real veteran, probably at writing.
I mean, he's written so many books.
Yeah. Like it's when you're so much. I mean, I don't know how long have you been writing, Andrew, but I'm talking about like a seasoned fucking writer that writes every day, all day long.
Yeah,
I think you get to a point where you have full control of everything. It's like fighting, like UFC. Yeah. There's some fighters, some expert fighters. They don't look at videos and tapes of their opponents because they've seen it all. So they prefer to react to what's in front of them during the fight,
That's how Stephen King described it. He was like, Stephen King was like, I have a goal for how many words I want to write a day, and I can usually achieve that goal by about lunchtime. And then the rest of the day, I'm going about my business, and I'm just letting my characters tell me what they want to do next. And I'm like, I get that. I get your characters taking on a role in your mind, but I don't like that's so you're leaving so much up to chance and just letting how do you trust them enough to know that they're going to get you somewhere?
Right. Well, Matteo, could you imagine just like putting out, like, let's say you had a 20-page story to draw, just having 20 pieces of board and just no layouts, just start penciling a little bit here, a little bit there. You're bringing one panel to an ink finish on page 20 while page 2 is still blank. I actually did
something like that. There was a thing called I don't recall the exact name. It was basically a 24 hours comic book marathon. And it was done worldwide. Oh, okay. You're familiar 24 with hours.
It. Yeah, when I was a teacher, we did that. Like the whole, we stayed in the school all night. We had our whole department come in.
Yes,
24-hour comic. Yeah,
I went to my former school of comic books, and I stayed 24 hours there. I did 24 pages, and there, that's what I did. I had no clue of what I wanted to draw. I just went there and I started, drawing. Only when I saw that I was getting close to the end, that's when I started planning a little bit just to, I started thinking, okay, how do I want this whole thing to end? So let's drive the story so that we get there. But yeah, I have to say I was more free when I was younger because I had this I don't give a fuck attitude.
Yeah.
But I kind of,
we all did.
kind of lost. It got lost. I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing.
I think it's a bad thing.
It's a bad thing,
it's
right?
It's a youth thing. I'm not going to say it's... Yeah.
Oh, okay. It's a bad thing to lose it. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Or maybe it comes back when, they say sometimes even when painters, when you done so much, then you go back to being a kid and have fun.
Yeah. Yeah, Picasso did that,
Yeah, so maybe, who knows? I mean, right now I don't have enough stories in my belt on my belt.
I think the idea of doing that thing where where you just sit down and start drawing for 20 pages and be like, I'm just gonna I love the idea of that as an exercise. I would love to do that just to see what it's like, because I'm way too structured to just be like, all right, I can make a product out of this that I can sell. It's just hard to justify the time, I guess. But as an exercise, I think that sounds awesome. just being like, fuck it, let's just see what happens if I make no plans. It'd be hard to continue, like you're saying, all the way through the project, not making a plan, just feeling it out. I'm too much of a planner to just like release control, but I think it sounds really fun and cool to see what comes out of it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, you would learn a lot for sure as you're doing it. You know, it's something
Yeah,
we could do when we're old.
When you're old, it's just hard to go, like, that's a youth thing because you've got no real responsibilities. You can afford to just, it could be a total waste of time and you cannot get it done. It's okay. Yeah. It's just harder when you're older and you've got responsibilities, you've got mortgages, you got kids, you got like all that shit makes it tricky. But I think it's a good goal to try to get back to, because I do think creatively there's some definite rewards in doing that.
I think I remember Jaime Hernandez talking about, I think it was Love Bunglers or something, one of the Love and Rockets books, and him talking about it, he spoke about it almost like he was surprised at the ending, like as he was working through it, and it occurred to me, it's like, he must work that way, and like that's a really great book that has some really fun twists and turns and surprises in it. But to think that you would, and I'm like, I wonder if he makes or they make all of Love and Rockets without a plan, which was really blow my mind.
I would love to know. I would love to have Jaime on the podcast. That would be amazing.
That would be so cool.
Amazing.
You know, it's a fun thing that I've heard, like, well, I was about to say recently, but not that recently, probably a year and a half ago or something. I was in Spain for a show, and Rick Remender was there, and it was me and a bunch of other artists that on time they worked with Rick. And Greg Tocchini was there. He's a Brazilian phenom. Like he's incredible. Insane. And they back then they just started working on a new project together. And what he would do, this is as an artist, so it's not really, you know, as a writer, but he was just reading page 1 of the script and just started drawing it. And then he would read page 2 and just start drawing. Oh my
God.
So he wanted to be, it just came to my head because you said you wanted to be surprised. You know, he wanted to be surprised by the script. So he decided to go that way about it. So he started doing 1 page at a time, read 1 page at a time, and just execute.
Well, you're putting a lot of faith. Yeah, you're putting a lot of faith in that script to do a lot of the work for you.
And a lot of faith in, like, I feel like your own like designs, because you don't really know what you're going to draw over and over again. So you may draw something and be like, maybe, whatever, it's a throwaway. And then you've got to draw over and over and be like, I would have done a better job on page 1 if I knew this would be this important.
That's true.
Or maybe on the next page, you're going to need a specific shot that you've used on the previous page. Yes. So normally what you would do is you would change the previous one. And here you already done it, so you're fucked. You gotta go with another idea. So it's pretty scary, but it's interesting.
It is interesting.
Yeah, it's something that, you know.
I mean, it's definitely trial by fire, working that way.
Yeah.
Andrew, I want to ask you about your decision to take Headlopper to Image versus just keeping on kickstarting for yourself.
I mean, for me, it was easy. I wanted to get published. I wasn't self-publishing like as a choice. And I would say that it was definitely the right move. Like so many more people found me because of that wide distribution and even the branding on Image. I felt like I was...
And sorry to interrupt real quick. And also it was the right time, because those years for Image were the years with the capital Y. I don't know if you agree with that, but you know, that's when Black Science was published more or less, and those were the years where
that was when Walking Dead was the big TV show and Image was booming.
Yeah, I think...
Sorry to interrupt, man.
No, it's totally cool. I think it was the right move. I feel like, so I would say that like right now, I think the couple Kickstarters I've done recently, they do really well. And one of the things that is one of the things that's really great about, say, self-publishing and Kickstarter versus traditional publishing is that when you self-publish, you're taking out all of those middlemen, you're taking out the distributor, you're taking out the publisher, you're taking out so many people who have their hands in your pocket. And so as an example, it's like, so for example, like it takes me about 2 years to do a trade paperback of Headlopper. It's like, approximately 200 pages or so. And the Image will print it, you guys know this, I'm sure, but Image prints it. And then the money that comes to the artists, the creators, it's the money that is Image selling it to the distributor. So they're going to print it for like a couple dollars, and then they're going to sell it to the distributor for like a couple dollars more. And so the profit margin on what ends up being a $20 book down here at the very bottom is like $1 or $2, like, and then you're going to split it with Image, and then you got to cover all your costs first, which are tens of thousands of dollars. And so even after you've paid off your print run and everything, I'm probably making at most like $1 per copy of a book that took me 2 years to draw. So, that's 5% of the whole trade paperback cost, $20. And if you're
Is it coming out in floppies as well, or only TP?
Yeah, it comes out in floppies. I do oversized quarterly issues, so like 35 to like 55 pages or so.
Yeah.
Because
for those, correct me if I'm wrong, with the floppies, Image takes a flat fee, so it's not.
It's like
right?
it's printing costs and everything, of course, first all the overhead.
Yeah, of course.
And then their fee is like $2,000, I think, which kind of pays the office.
Yeah, or $2,500, $2,000, yes.
Yeah. So in comparison to self-publishing, I can sell a book that is say like Snarlagon. I think it was like 36 pages of art or something like that, and Agatha a little less. So I can sell those at $10 a piece, which for self-published books is pretty cheap. Like a lot of people will sell those books for like 15 to 30 or something, but I want people I want to use those books as a way for people to find my work. So I'm trying to make them as cheap as possible, but it can cost me as low as like $2 to $3 to print. So that means for each one of those books that I sell, I can make $7. So it's like $7 for a book that took me like 3 months to draw versus $1 for a book that took me, 2 years to draw. Yes, I can sell, eventually over time, maybe, I don't know, 100,000 copies or something over maybe a couple print runs or something of a trade paperback. But it's like, if I can just sell like 2,000 or 3,000 of a self-published book, it's the equivalent of selling tens of thousands or 100,000 copies of something that took me 2 years to draw. That said, I think that if you only do self-publishing, it can be really hard to sell, 2,000 to 3,000 books. But if you do have a book that's, or a couple books that are distributed through Image or some traditional form of distribution, you found a fan base that way as well. So I think for me right now, it's nice to do a little bit of both. If I have some books in comic book stores, people are finding my work there. And then they might be like, when I have a Kickstarter, they might be like, oh, I remember this guy or something. Because I don't think if I didn't have a book at Dark Horse, if I didn't have a book at Image, I don't think I could sell, 2,000 or 3,000 copies, through a Kickstarter. That would be a much bigger challenge.
Gotcha.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, it's a matter of choices. Like, and it's the same thing that I'm asking myself now that I have, I'm doing my own book. It's like, do I want more people to see it, but probably get less money for it, or just be practical, or maybe the same amount of money, but over, as you said, over a longer period of time, or, or just do it through Kickstarter.
Totally.
I'll have less people reading it, but they're more passionate specifically about my work and they want to support me. That's why they're willing to spend more, for a book that normally, in a comic book shop would cost less. And, but yeah, and make more money, like almost immediately with a Kickstarter campaign. So it's a thing that you got to think about. And also, I mean, this made sense more probably like 10 years ago. Maybe with image was better before, because you could, with the right product, if it was pushed in the right way through the right channels, you could sell, like, we're talking about 50, 60, 70,000 copies for the first trade. Of course, the first book, the first issue. And of course, you know, it will go down. Yeah. But, you know, you're starting from, you know, a really high level of a really high number of readers. So it's, you know, it's stuff that there's a lot of stuff, you know.
Matteo, do you remember what issue 1 of Black Science, how many units that sold?
It's 50,000.
Okay. And then, like, towards the end, how many units were you guys selling a month?
It went 50,000 the first one. Then usually it goes, you lose half of it on issue number 2. And we were lucky. It went like around 35,000 the second one. And we were super happy about that. And then it slowly went like 32, 31, 29, 28. And by the end, it was like around 10,000, 11,000 copies. It's still
really good.
It was still good. We were making a lot of money from the, how you call it, the single issues anymore, especially because we were paying like people a lot, like our colorists would get paid a lot. So, you know, and we always had variant covers for floppies. So in the end, we didn't get a lot of money per floppy, but the TPBs, especially when you have, and by the way, Andrew, a great idea about having 9 trades out. If I understood it right, for Head Lopper, that's the plan, right?
Yeah, that's my plan. Yeah.
Yeah. Once you have that, like over 7 TPBs, once, you know, number 4 comes out, number 1, 2, 3, you know, gets sold more, so on and so on and so on. So it's a self-feeding machine.
Yeah, totally.
So in the end,
that was a piece of advice I got from, we already talked about him, Shawn Murphy. It was like years ago. I had just finished volume 1. I wanted to do volume 2. And I was just curious if, again, it was like I had a graphic novel at Dark Horse, and then the first trade paperback of Headlopper Image wanted to make more Headlopper. And I asked Shawn, I was like, do you think, because he had been jumping around from project to project quite a bit. And I was curious if he thought that jumping around from project to project was better than sticking with one title. You know, I was like, does it make sense? You can find new people and then they'll follow you along. I didn't realize at the time that people don't really follow creators very much, but he was just in the example he used. He's like, I think it's better to stay on a title. And his example was like, look at, you know, Ryan Otley, you know, if he draws, you know, volume 21 of Invincible, yes, number 21 came out, but what he's going to end up selling is number 1. And then if that person stays on for number 1, they're going to buy 2, 3, 4, 5. And then, you know, you put out one new product, but you might sell 20, you know?
Right.
And that made a lot of sense to me. And I loved drawing Headlopper, and, you know, the business of it made sense. And I was like, all right, cool. Fucking
absolutely. Also, you're the only creator. You're the writer and the artist. So, I mean, it's a great difference. That's why, like right now, helps. I always say, if you're a writer and you start to get successful, just keep doing like image books. The only difficult thing is find an artist that's consistent enough to guarantee you constant,
hard.
You know, books constantly going out. But if you find that, dude, like, there's no comparison to even doing Marvel or DC stuff. There's so much money on the table if you're a writer.
Yeah, there is. I do think it's, you know, I don't envy writers in that it's got to be harder than, I mean, it's easier as in writing is very quick. And you can do a lot of writing, and that's very helpful. But at the same time, it's like, like an artist, you can tell whether you're like an artist in like in a second, right? You know, you can tell if they're like good or not, and all that. So like I'm always, and then the other thing that happens is because artists actually drawing is just hard and slow. So much of the kind of like the business side, I feel like of doing a creator-owned project, especially image or something, falls on the artist. Like, how do we get this? I mean, falls on the writer. How do we get this artist paid? Do you know what I mean? So I don't really envy the pure, you know, writer. I'm grateful as someone who ended up writing and drawing, and my wife helps me so much in the office with lettering and design and editing and everything. So much of one of the things that's really helped us is we kept our team in the house, like literally. So like we have Jordi Belair on colors. And so that's the only thing that we really outsource, you know, apart from that, our pot like of money coming in from our books, it's just not split as much. Like our household benefits by us working on the same project.
Yeah. And you also have Laser Wolf Attack, right? The branding company as well on the side, right?
Yeah, that was when my wife started to work with me full time. That was the other thing that we started. We had like one T-shirt that was just kind of selling like hotcakes at conventions, and we were like, you know, fuck it, let's just make some more T-shirts, see what happens. And it's definitely really hard to keep two things going, like to create a comic and create like a web store. But yeah, that was part of it too, was to supplement the comics work with, you know, merchandise and T-shirts and stuff.
That's great, man.
Yeah. And so Andrew, before we're done here, I did want to talk about getting into toy design, because it's something that's definitely an interest of mine, and I've loved how you've stepped into it. So how did you kind of get into it, and what are your thoughts on it?
I mean, like I just like making stuff, and it's not always like, sometimes I want to make things that aren't necessarily practical. And I collect.
Well, that's what being an artist is.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. I just love, I mean, like I got like this 80s Godzilla right here, you know, like I just love this shit. You know?
Yeah, I love that too.
Yeah, this one's particularly nostalgic, but I like collect a lot of like, you know, modern, you know, soft vinyl designer toys and stuff, kaiju stuff. And so I love that stuff. I just love it. And it inspires a lot of the art that I make. And so if I love something, I want to get involved in it. And it's also, you know, like anything else, its own like learning curve. There's a lot of mistakes to be made, and it can be a really, I think it's harder than comics in terms of like a business. There's less people who are interested in buying, you know,
and it's more expensive.
Like art toys, it's more expensive.
Oh, yeah.
Totally.
You have to put a lot of money up front.
Yeah. And like, we designed this toy, this character I have, Commander Thunderfang, this like tiger character. And it cost us so much to produce this toy. And I can look back at it and realize that there's so many mistakes that I made along the way that made that happen. Like all the way back to the drawing. I was just like, if I did XYZ, you know, like we charge $150 for that toy. It costs me $100 per toy to make it. Like that is,
oh my God,
so much. Like I don't, and then to sell a toy for $150, you're now in competition with like, you know, really
Mondo.
Famous toy makers. Yeah, exactly. So I love it.
So how many of those did you make?
I've made
5 millions. It still has to recover from the investment. It was a lot of money.
That's so I think we made, and that was one of the mistakes, is I think we made of that toy like 225 of those figures or something. It did take it.
All right. Well, that's a lot of money.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it costs us like, I don't even want to say how much it costs us, but it's one of those things too.
20K or something. Yeah,
it was like 30. Yeah, so like I mean, to some of those toys, it can cost you $10,000 just in creating the molds. That said,
and you didn't kickstart that one, right?
I did not kickstart that. It was just one thing led to another, and it's like one of those things. It's like once that ball is rolling, it's like, well, we've already got X. We've already spent this much. You know, it's like it's not going to sell unless we take it to this next step. And each quote,
Right.
like we'd get a quote, and then like the actual like bill would come in, and it'd be like twice as much. And it happened all the way through that freaking project.
Oh my God.
It was like, yeah. I mean, we have, broken even on that one. But again, I also approached that project much more like a comic book. Like a comic book, you have like one version of it, maybe some variant covers, and you sell them in bulk. But that world is much more exclusive, which is also one of my mistakes. So, for example, I've got some Snarly toys at the factory right now. I've found, cheaper ways to get it produced. Like these will all be painted by me. And also
nice.
like,
Wow.
instead of releasing like those Commander Thunderfangs, they were like each like colorway, each variant was like 75 of them. Well, I didn't realize this at the time. That's a very comic book way to approach it, when generally in that world, there's much more variants and they're each much more limited. Like a lot of those toy producers would be like, here's 5, here's 10 in this colorway.
Right.
And then later on, they'll drop like 5 more, And so I think that's probably the way I'll continue to approach it, is more, how that industry, because again, they're two different industries. If someone like say collects comic books, it doesn't mean that they collect toys, and vice
That's
versa.
true.
Yeah,
True.
absolutely.
And how did the Agatha toy do for you?
That did really well. I thought it was a really fun idea. It's got a removable head.
Yeah, and it's production wise, it's incredible. Like just seeing the growth from each toy you've done. That one's like the apex.
Yeah, I think so too. Like, I mean, wait till you see these Snarly toys, though. They're freaking awesome. But
I'm excited to see that.
they're fantastic. Yeah, I really love them. But one of the fun things, we worked with HH Toys on the Agathas, and even though I really love to collect soft vinyl toys, having the head pop off, it really needed to be a solid like resin toy. It needed to be like, you can't, for people who maybe don't know, that the soft vinyl toys are hollow and their joints are really pressed together. You can take them apart, but it's not easy. So having these solid resin toys was really necessary for the popping head on it. I thought it was a really fantastic idea, and HH Toys makes really great stuff. But I was like predicting, I was like, we're going to sell in the Kickstarter like 100 max. Like, it's a cool idea, but any more than 100 is absurd. I think we sold like 200 of them or something. And
Nice.
just,
Holy
Nice.
fuck. Awesome.
yeah, they were just so popular.
That's
And honestly, they've been such great partners at HH. They pulled it together. Like, I've had sculpts with sculptors that have taken years, and I think they pulled this sculpture together in like 2 weeks or something. Like, the whole thing was just fucking awesome, fantastic, and I'm really pleased with how they came out.
That's great. That's great.
That's awesome, man.
We're
I
getting
remember
close to the hour.
you just made me remember of our black science statue that we did, and we didn't
I
think
remember
about
that.
any of the critical points at all.
It's
we
so
just,
hard.
what happened was just sorry. You were saying?
I was just saying, it's so hard. Like, it's so different than making comics. You just don't know, like, when you're making a mistake when you first start making 3D things.
Yeah, man. I remember what happened was we started talking about it, and then Rick saw somebody posting, like a 3D modeler, posting something on Instagram. He was a fan of Black Science, so he decided to basically rebuild one of the main covers of Black Science for the first TPB. He redid it in a 3D model. I was like, oh, this is beautiful. I've already hired the guy. I was like, Jesus, man, already? Shouldn't we do more research and see what's... No, that's it. So we built it up, and then basically some parts were too thin. So basically there's a fucking wrist that always broke. Like, everybody who got their statue, it comes with a broken wrist, if not more broken parts. So it was
oh my God.
it was a fucking, I mean, it's a beautiful statue. I have a couple here. They're beautiful. I had to glue them up because of course they became all broken. But
so how did you handle that when people are like, hey, my statue's broken?
I don't even want to know. It's
oh yeah, okay.
They did it. I only had the 2 statues. We made some money out of it, and that's all I know.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Like, there's so many limitations down to like what shapes you can make with certain materials and everything. And like, you can think you know the ins and outs, and you're still gonna run into a problem somewhere. Like, I mean, again, like, I think these Snarlagon toys will go better and easier than like our Commander Thunderfang, but something is going to come along the way. And we've had to revisit the sculpt over and over again, because once it gets to the factory, they're like, all right, XYZ is coming out this way. But yeah, I had a friend that's like, and everything's different, you know, like your product was probably made in like molds that split like this, you know, and that's a very different thing than like vinyl molds where everything is just solid and just fills from the top. And you got to think of like all these things, like the shapes. How do they come out of molds? And like, I don't know, we just draw pictures. Like, this is all new to us.
Right.
Yeah, I want to draw, and then you call me when it's done, and I have it. That's it.
All right. Well, we've hit our hour. Did you have any other questions, Matteo, you wanted to get to before we shut it down?
No, it's good. I just want to ask Andrew if there's anything that you wanted to plug, because your latest Kickstarter campaign, Agatha, it's already done. Is there a way to get the book anyway? Because it's basically a prequel of Headlopper.
Yeah,
the story of the Blue Witch, basically. No.
Yeah. I just knew that like Headlopper's not going to, get started again until next year. So I was like, I gotta give people a taste of Headlopper while they wait for the new stuff. So as of right now, it's not available yet. The big batch of it is at the printer, but the goal is it should be at the warehouse in a couple of days. So the goal is to have them up on my website, Laser Wolf Attack, probably for like Black Friday, like around Christmas. I mean, around like Thanksgiving, like the end of the month, basically.
Awesome. Yeah.
And,
Great.
We also have our other self-published
exactly
books
when you
like
said that it's not ideal to put stuff out to sell.
No, that's a good time to sell. It's just, I think it's a good time to sell.
Yeah, no, I was joking. It was just for the joke. No, Kickstarter. Yeah, you were talking about Kickstarter.
Yeah. No, actually, it's changed a little bit, but we used to hit like, that Black Friday kind of sales thing really hard. And when we did, it would pay off so well. Like, it would be a ton of work, like its own project, but you could, in a weekend, right, that at the end of, Thanksgiving, turn around sales that were as good, sometimes better than like a New York Comic-Con or something. But it's just hard. It's like a whole
awesome, man.
Yeah, it's like a whole other project. It's a whole other job. Exactly. So unless you can duplicate yourself, it can be hard to just pull off. But that's the goal, is to try to offer some really good stuff for at the end of the month, end of November. So yeah, we want to try to get another batch of the Agatha toys up there, the Agatha comic, the new Agatha t-shirts, and then of course, Snarlagon we've got up there already.
That's awesome, man.
Dope. All right.
Hey, thanks a lot again for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So much fun.
That was awesome.
Great chatting with you guys.
A lot of insight, man. Thanks a lot for your time.
My
Are
pleasure.
you ready, Matteo?
It's good.
This is
It just keeps going.
the Inkpulp podcast.
Right. Shawn, according to my analytics, your thumbnails are one of the highest in demand items on the internet. What have you got to say about that?
Jim, funny you should say that. I have a gift for everyone in the Inkpulp community. A free PDF of some of my thumbnails, as Jim said, which are in high demand. Also, I'm giving you a new home, the home of craft, the official home of the Inkpulp community, inkpulp.tv. A place where you can learn about the craft of comics, engage with the community, receive special offers, and so much more. In order to get your free PDF, head to Inkpulp TV, sign up for the newsletter. This is just the beginning of so many wonderful things to come. Thank you. keep craft alive.